Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the DC Capstone Report. It's great to be back with you on another week of the podcast on Alabama football. Lance and I are really proud that we get to bring you this podcast each and every week. We hope you'll check us out at dccapstonereport.com, DC Capstone Report Facebook page. Like us there, share our podcast. We'd love to get the word out to others that you may know that would enjoy this type of podcast. Also, check out Lance's other sites, rolltidebama.com, freelancepictures.com. Right there on our DC Capstone Report page, you can go to our website. There's a place to click on to download some free iPhone or Android wallpaper schedules for your phone for Alabama football. So be sure and take up the opportunity to do that. We'd love you to get one of our schedules and place it on your phone so you'll know when we play and who we play throughout the year. Well, today on the podcast, we're going to take a look at the second scrimmage. We're at the second scrimmage of fall camp. Fall camp is moving along, so we're going to take a look at the second scrimmage. In the first segment, we're going to look at the overall assessment of the second scrimmage. In the second segment, we're going to take a look at the offense and kind of zero in on the offense. And in the third and final segment of this podcast, we'll take a look at the defense and what they were able to accomplish in the scrimmage. You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on the Martin Houston Show at Tide 100.9. You can listen live at tide100.9.com. Well, here we are on the first segment of the DC Capstone Report. We're going to take a look at the second scrimmage. Alabama football fall camp is motoring along now. This week, the thing that changed was the students are back in class. Two things happen. You have to marginalize their time with their class and their studying, so they have less time to get ready for fall camp, and you have to make sure you do it at times when they're not in class. And you also, a good thing, you have more walk-ons that get to come in and provide some players to go up against in these practices as well. So that's kind of the change on where we are. In the second scrimmage, you should be making some ideas of who your players or playmakers are going to be and what your teams are going to consist of, and that's exactly what we saw in this second scrimmage. Listen to Coach Saban talk about his overall view of the second scrimmage was that overall both first-team units look really good, pretty good. Both first-team units look pretty good. So as an overall assessment, what he meant by that was the first team played more consistent, and that's what he had challenged them to do, to make sure that they played more consistent in the second scrimmage. Know what to expect, know what your role is, and define and do your role. So if anything that came out of this, a good positive in that second scrimmage was that the first teamers were more consistent. And that was across the board. First team offense, first team defense. Coach Saban really talked about the changes that he saw. There were less drops in this one, more concentration, better blocking, better tackling, better red zone play by the first team defense. So overall, it appeared that they got the message between the first scrimmage and the second scrimmage, and that's not uncommon. You probably make your most improvement between the first scrimmage and second scrimmage. After this second scrimmage now, as we come into this week of practice, we've only got 13 more days until Alabama kicks off against Utah State. So the volume amount of input in these first 2 weeks is going to reduce to lesser input as you get closer to game preparation. So this second scrimmage, they had a lot of different schemes, a lot of different processes to kind of go through and process throughout their evaluation of how they did. And the first team really seemed to do good. Now, the contrast to that is Coach Saban said there was a lot of work to do on the second team. And he was answering the question where it could have meant that you could have interpreted it to mean the second team offensive line. But that's not what he said. He said that attributed to every team. The second team offensive line, second team skill players, second team defense. Everybody on the second team needs to step up. So I think here Coach Saban is sending a message to the players that now the time is to try to make a role for yourself on this team. Do you see yourself contributing? Do you see yourself making a difference on this team? Can you carve out a niche for you to play on this 2022 Alabama football team? It appears from what he was talking about that the first teamers, those people who are applying for those, vying for those first team roles, really have done a good job of zoning in and getting themselves in a good way. The second teamers, a little bit lack of focus and a lack of consistency is showed out when they get on the field. And some of that comes with tiredness. Some of that comes with, as he calls it, outside distractions, and being able to handle that, being able to have the volume of information that you've been given and be able to translate that to your play on the field and playing at a high speed and at a high level. So I think and he needs those who are going to play in for roles on this offensive and defensive teams that are need to be more consistent. This week, we coming out of the next opportunity, need to be more consistent and need to start defining some roles for themselves. Overall, when you listen to some of the players talk about the overall scrimmage, one thing kind of stood out to me is that on this team, leadership, and I believe Coach Saban kind of hinted to this as well. The leadership is better on this team than it was on last year's team. And it's not that we have the different people in leadership. It's just that the ones that are following. Coach Saban talked about in two parts of leadership. You have to be a leader, and you have to display those skills that people want to lead. But then you have to have people that want to follow you and emulate that type of thing. So it's one thing to talk it, but it's another thing to do it and then have people follow you and emulate that. Talking and listening to some of the players talk, one player specifically said, "Hey, we don't have a lot of knuckleheads in this locker room." So I took that to mean that last year's team had some knuckleheads on it. So what's happened to those quote unquote knuckleheads that caused a disarray in the team chemistry? Well, some of them graduated, I'm sure. Some of them transferred out, and now they're trying to make it at other programs. And some of them may have been freshmen who had just not bought into the process and have matured, and they're still on the team, and now they're following and following this good leadership they're getting. So I think that's a very positive to have come out of this overall assessment of the team in the second scrimmage is that leadership is good. People are buying in. They're following along. And we just need some of our second team, third team members, those people trying to carve a place for themselves, a niche for themselves to play in this team, to kind of step up their game, be more consistent, and emulate that good leadership in order to play each and every play. And I think Coach Saban reiterated in his overall assessment of some of those players, in order to make the next step, have to forget about the bad play. And it seems like some of our freshmen, first-time players, have a bad play, and then that affects them 5-6 plays down the road. And that's not what Coach Saban, his philosophy, his process is that you have that bad play and then you burn it and you move on to the next play so you can play up to your best in that next play. You can't be thinking of it 4 or 5 plays down the road. And it appears to be that some of our second team players need to kind of fall into this lesson, this process. And right here, as we close out this first segment, I want to tell you about, there's a new book out that I recommend everyone get. It's called The Leadership Secrets of Nick Saban, How Alabama's Coach Became the Greatest Ever. It's by John Talty, a reporter with AL.com. I recommend this book highly. I finished it this week. And inside, if you're a leader in any organization, if you're a leader in your home, if you're a leader at your church, if you're a leader of your family, of your children, this is a great book to get to learn about leadership skills, not just about Alabama football. But when you read it, for a person like me who does a podcast on Alabama football, it opens the curtain to kind of see the behind the scene of what's going on. So based on my knowledge of reading that book, and I really thank John Talty for writing it, it's really good for all of us to read. I recommend it highly. You should go out and get it, get a copy of it. But in looking and able to look behind that curtain just a little bit when we're talking about this overall view of the second scrimmage, we see some of these process things that maybe the second teamers haven't kind of fallen into yet. They haven't grasped yet. But I think that's something that we can see happen in the next couple of weeks to see how that comes together. And I believe it will. We'll see how it comes together in the next opportunity they get to perform, if that gels and if they are more consistent. Because I think that's really what we're looking for, is consistency from our second team in this overall second scrimmage. Well, here on the second segment of the podcast, we're going to zero in on the offense. Well, as you heard me talk about in the first segment, the overall first teamers did good. So there was a couple of players on the first team offense that really, really did a good job, and that was our skill players. First of all, Coach said Bryce Young had a great game, had a great scrimmage, and some of the people that I talked to that were at the scrimmage gave me firsthand reports of how crisp his throws are, how great his footwork is. And if you can believe that he has improved over a Heisman season, he actually seems to have improved in several areas in getting the ball to different receivers, running through his progressions. So overall, Bryce Young had a good scrimmage. I think having a second year with his offense coordinator has really come a long way for him to be able to gel and to know. He's kind of like that other coach on the field, another offense coordinator on the field, to know exactly what the plan is and how to implement that plan. And it showed in this first scrimmage where he really had a really good scrimmage for the offense. Another skilled player that had a good scrimmage was Trayshawn Holden. He's been a wide receiver that we've hoped would step up. You know, everybody talked about is Ja'Cory Brooks going to be the one to step up from his freshman to sophomore year. But, you know, I talked about Trayshawn Holden going into his junior year, seeing flashes of brilliance from him, and it really showed in the scrimmage. My sources that talked to me after the scrimmage said that he had at least 3 touchdowns in this one. One where he really put a move on one of the players by him in the defense for the cornerback position, that Terrion Arnold, who's really, by all intents and purposes, had a great fall camp so far, but put a move on him that got him open and really took a 60-yard touchdown into the end zone there in that scrimmage. So Trayshawn Holden has really seemed to separate himself as a player who you can really put in one of those positions at wide receiver, really competing hard for a starting role. So it's really good to see him stepping up and doing that. The third skill player, which I heard so much about and we've all heard about, and I can't wait to see in a game time decision, is Jahmyr Gibbs. Everyone that talked about this scrimmage was Jahmyr Gibbs has just a different gear. Some people describe it, he has a twitch, he has a quickness that we haven't had before. He has breakaway speed, people have described it. Others describe him as just different. A couple of the defensive players speaking this week just said, hey, he's different. When you see him play, he just jumps out at you as being different. So he's been a great addition. He spoke this week to the media and did a really good job of handling himself with the media and talking about his transition to Alabama and how all the players had welcomed him with open arms and he had felt like he was just at home. And he was just trying to do what's best for him and his family in his transfer. So it appears that he had a great game in the second scrimmage as well. The other thing that came out of this on the offense that seemed to be really important was the offensive line seems to have gelled in the first team, at least those players that are playing right now, penciled in as first team offensive line. I don't know what the final 5 will be, but it looks like they've got Darren Davenport and Seth McLaughlin has had a great competition at center. But right now, it looks like Darren Davenport has overtaken slightly a lead over Seth McLaughlin. Great to have 2 good centers that can really come in and play at any time. So it's always good to have that kind of depth. So it looks like Darren Davenport has been doing a good job. Coach Saban spoke highly of him. It looks like at the guard position, you got Emil Achior at right guard. Kendall Randolph has been playing at left guard, which is a surprise. Kind of thought, that maybe opportunities for some other players to step in there, but he is a 6th-year player using his COVID year to stay there. He's been kind of like a Swiss Army knife on the offensive line, playing at tight end, tackles, and guard all across the front. So seeing him do that has been really impressive to see him step up and try to take one of those starting roles. I think there is competition behind him, so it remains to be seen what will be the final first string, but he was competing and playing on the first string, which Coach Saban said was a very consistent offensive line. And then at the tackles, you got J.C. Latham, who's really come on this year, made some strides, and you got Anthony Steen, who transferred in from Vanderbilt. Steen has really done a good job, really got a hold of the offense. But overall, it seems like Coach Woolford has really done a good job of gelling this team together. And it was really good to see people talk about that first team offensive line, how they did, how they made this scrimmage well for Bryce Young. And that's going on ones-on-one, so that means they were going up against every day in practice and in this scrimmage a great defensive line for Alabama. So I was really glad to hear him talk about that first offensive line. The second offensive line, the second team just really didn't have a good scrimmage, very inconsistent, up and down. And they're going to have to make some adjustments as we come into this next scrimmage next week to see them play with more consistency. But overall in the offense, Bryce Young, Trayshawn Holden, Jahmyr Gibbs all had good games, good scrimmage. And I think Coach Saban really talked about the running backs a little more when he talked about this offense. And he is very comfortable with the running back room that he has. A lot more depth, barring any injuries this year, than we had last year. You got Jahmyr Gibbs, you got Trey Sanders, who's come on, really playing well, and then you got Roydell Williams and Jace McClellan, who's bounced back from those injuries they had last year. And then Jamarian Miller, I think, has been a freshman that stepped up to the plate and had some good plays. So I think there's 5 players. It remains to be seen what the pecking order will be. I guess we'll get to see that in the depth chart when it first comes out before the first game against Utah State. But right now, really happy with the running back room. Really happy with the offense overall in this second scrimmage. Well, here we are in third and final segment. We're going to look at the defense. The defense played really good in this scrimmage. First team defense seemed to be doing a good job. You know about your outside linebackers that play. I think Dallas Turner had a really good scrimmage. I think Will Anderson Jr. was limited, not by injury, but just by limited in his number of plays by the coaching staff, because giving some other people opportunities. And by doing that, there's a third name you need to know about in that defensive outside linebacker position, edge rusher position, and that is Chris Braswell. Chris Braswell is a name you need to get familiar with. We all know about what Dallas Turner can do. We all know what Will Anderson Jr. can do, but Chris Braswell has really jumped off the page in his work ethic and trying to get himself ready for this year, and it has really showed in his play. It showed in the play in this scrimmage. He's strong, he's quick, he has a great stab move to get off blockers, shed blockers. So just listen to that name, Chris Braswell, and opportunities he might have to make a name for himself this year, even in that third down, rushing the quarterback where he comes in. We play all 3 of them together, or when he spells either Dallas Turner or Will Anderson Jr. during the year to give them some rest. But a lot of depth there at that outside rusher position, and could see a really good play from those 3 this year. The linebackers had a solid scrimmage. Jalen Moody had a good scrimmage. I think Henry To'oTo'o and Deontay Lawson, Jihad Campbell, others have been playing that position. They all had a really good scrimmage. Our backers had some little injuries keeping our defensive backs out. So it was a different combination of players, but they all had some plays where they did good. They had some plays where they gave up some big plays because you had the offense doing so well. We know that, but it appears that Kyrie Jackson has really played well. I think Eli Ricks has been hurt. He'll be able to come back this week, it looks like, and play. But right now, Kool-Aid McKinstry and Kyrie Jackson seem to be playing at the corners. Of course, you're going to have DeMarco Hellams and Jordan Battle at the safeties, and you got Malachi Moore and Brian Branch playing the star and nickel position. And then you got the likes of Terrion Arnold and Jake Pope and others making opportunities to play. Eli Ricks making opportunities to play in those other positions as well. So looks like we've got a solid defensive backfield that seems to be doing really well. Did well in the scrimmage. I want to talk about finally here the defensive line. We heard from DJ Dale this week, and just to listen to that young man talk and the I guess the maturity that he's shown since he came here as a freshman. He's been here a while now, going into his senior season, coming back to better himself, to create value for himself. And from everything I am hearing, he has done a really good job at leadership on that defensive line. And this could possibly be one of the deepest defensive lines that Coach Saban has had. And you remember some of the greatest defensives that we put on the field in years past have been those where he's been able to rotate defensive linemen, and on the rotations, we didn't get any drop-off. If anything, we may have ramped it up for those that were coming in that were fresh and playing just at the same skill level or better than those that was ahead of them. So to hear DJ Dale talk, that's what this defensive line is consist of. When you got Jamil Burrows and you got Jaheim Otis, a freshman who DJ Dale talked really highly of doing everything the coaches have asked him to do as far as getting in shape and being able to play. They're just thoughts that people. He says that it's just hard to move him off the ball, and we haven't had a defensive lineman in a while that's been that hard to move off the ball since we had Mount Cody on the team years ago. So this defensive line really played well, and we have, as I've said, opportunity for this defense. If it solidifies and barring injuries, it has the opportunity for this defense to be the best defense that Alabama's put on the field in quite some time. So I look forward to seeing what we can do against regular competition against Utah State. But we got another week of practice, and overall I think we can use that. This coming week of practice, what it looks like to me we'll be doing is when you solidify your starters and get your pecking order on paper as far as your depth chart, so you know who's going to play. This coming week is when you're going to try to make decisions on who's going to be in, who's going to make plays for us, who's going to contribute during the year. So that's the ones you're going to give the reps as you go into that final week of practice for Utah State. So look for this week to kind of get some defining roles. Maybe know who our kick returners are. I understand that Kool-Aid McKinstry is kind of leading at the punt returning right now that JoJo Earl is hurt. So Kool-Aid McKinstry may be leading that now, but you might see Jamar Gibbs, Tyler Harrell running kicks back as far as kickoffs. And you're probably going to find out as we get a little closer to Utah State who are some of our role players that will play on special teams and have an opportunity to contribute during the regular game. So that's all for this week on the DC Capstone Report. We thank you for tuning in. We thank you for listening to us. Hope that you'll go to our website, share our page, like our page on Facebook, and remind you to go and check out Lance's other sites, RollTideBama.com and FreelancePictures.com. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you back here again next week. And until then, this is DC with the DC Capstone Report. Roll Tide.